Good evening and welcome to the June 24th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe and I will be your host this evening. Thank you so very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you share part of your Monday evenings with us. So whether you're at home, you're driving home, you're listening on the radio stations or tune in via social media, GBN television, whatever medium you're using, certainly thank you. This evening we're taking a look at the Grenada's economic outlook, and I have two esteemed gentlemen who are leaders within Grenada's business sector as we examine Grenada's economic outlook looking forward, but with some reflection, of course, because we must have some grounding as to where we were and where we are now and where we're looking to head. So it is an absolute pleasure for me to welcome the private sector representative in our upper house of Parliament, Senator Salim Rahaman. Greetings.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and good evening to your viewers and to the nation, Grenadians at home and in the diaspora.
Excellent. And online we have the president of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Kennie John. Good evening, Kennie.
Pleasant good night to all your viewers, wide and far.
Excellent, excellent. And we have you online, so Kennie, permit me to start off with you. You're the president of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and just share with our viewers a little bit about the chamber, its mission and its vision. We would have heard references to GCIC. We know the cricket competition, that is GCIC. But what do you guys do? What's your mission? What's your vision?
So essentially, the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce is an advocacy organization to advocate on behalf of businesses in all aspects of life as it relates to our businesses in the country. We lobby, we bring together, and certainly we share with our members any key insight as to what is going on and what may affect them. Okay. Vision-wise, it is our hope to be an advocate for all businesses, whether you're big or small.
Okay. What is your membership like? About how many members make up the GCIC?
We have approximately 250 members. Officially. Okay. We also have associates. The Grenada Tourism Authority is an associate. The Bus Association, they are also associates. So apart from membership, outright membership, we do have a few affiliates in the society that we collaborate with on various aspects of business.
Okay, and who can become a member?
Oh, any business really. While the chamber has always been known to some extent, and it's not sort of what we're proud of, but most of the larger businesses in the country are members of the chamber. However, we also have some small and medium-sized businesses and some startups that do seek to find out how the chamber can benefit them.
Okay, and I know that you took over the presidency probably about 2 years or thereabouts ago. What has been the focus of your advocacy during your tenure thus far?
Well, my tenure so far has, I had three main goals. One was to improve the membership, which I believe that somewhat we were able to achieve. Two, to be very aggressive in terms of making sure that the chamber and the private sector is represented in every manner. A lot of I would say there's some by statute and some by committees, government appointed committees, government statutory bodies. We have sought to be relevant as we forge our way and make sure that we do keep our members informed.
Okay.
The last of it was to basically have a more regional presence. presence. And we have, Grenada is now the chair of CARICHAM, which is the Caribbean Chamber of Commerce. And that we're very proud of also.
Excellent, excellent. Senator, how do you interface with the chamber? Because your title is private sector representative. You have a chamber of commerce with 200 plus members. How do you interface with the chamber and hence seek to advance their concerns?
So I have been I'm a chamber member myself as a businessman. I've served for many years in the chamber. So I know what it is like to be a member. I know what it is like to be a board member. I know what it is like to serve on the executive. I know what the pace of the chamber is like and what we have to work on in the private sector. And so I'm happy to represent, and then many of my colleagues, I would say, in the chamber, we are business associates. We have been for many, many years. So we know what pertains in the economy, what works, what needs to be improved, and we have a very good level of communication between ourselves. So amongst the current executive, they would be free to call me almost any time of the day or the night. Anything that is of interest to them, anything that concerns them. And President Kennie would attest to that we're always talking. We're always talking, and so much so that these jobs or responsibilities of ours have brought us even closer, and our families closer. Because in reality, the economy is small, and we have to work together to protect and to grow what we have in Grenada. And so we work well together, even with the Hotel Association. I work well together. I went to school with many of them. This is, our generation. Many of us are serving. So many of those who are currently serving, we went to school together. So we have a background of friendship and of business working together.
What is the protocol for businesses to be heard by the government of Grenada?
So what we would normally do, our advocacy, is that we would hear from our membership what are the issues, whether at AGM or any time. Businesses would say, look, this is important to us. Recently, businesses have been clamoring for some improvement as it relates, to the fast tracking of implementing solar and adopting the technology and transitioning and all that stuff. Some businesses are ahead of others, and we want to make sure that we move in a swift manner in that direction. So engaging with the government is done through the Secretariat of the Chamber. Of course, there's no harm in me speaking to a colleague in Parliament when I see them, to remind them or ask them. So for example, when we had the issue of we wanted to lower the driving age for T license from 25, that is something we spoke about. That is something the farmers represented next to me spoke about. We all supported that, and that was done. So that's an example but the government, yes, they said to us, we hear you. We have a lot to deal with, a lot on our plate, and we're working on it because it's legislation, and legislation takes some time.
That is really what I want. So first of all, let's establish that the chamber membership will make representation through the Secretariat to government, as opposed to the private sector representative serving as an advocate in Parliament. Or, is that both. The typical? Mm-hmm. Both.
So if there is an issue that I need to bring to the fore that is important for the chamber, I will mention it in Parliament, and I will raise the issue, and we will speak about it in Parliament. But you have to understand that the government has the majority, and you can only prod them so far. Government, it takes a while to change legislation. It has to be reviewed. It has to make sure that one piece of legislation is not contradicting another piece. And so when you make the suggestion, a lot of research has to be done. And in some cases, we do the research, we hire a lawyer to assist in research and so on, so that we can effect change faster. One such case is we're currently being assisted by CBER, that is Caribbean Business Enabling Environment Reform. That group is sponsored or funded by USAID. And in about a year, almost 2 years ago, they came to me and they asked me, what is the most important, what are one of the most important issues facing your community, the business community? And I mentioned to them that, energy, the cost of energy. We need to transition faster than we are doing now. And so, but there are certain gaps and there are certain hindrances. And so we would like help in that area. And they said, okay, we're going to have a study commissioned. And it is still in progress. It's almost done. We've just had a few days ago last week a final review of the findings of that study, which we are then going to present to government. And then we intend to form a committee across the private sector of qualified personnel to engage government to make sure that when legislation is passed and revised, that it doesn't have to be done twice. So all of that research has been done almost 2 years in the making. So we're quietly working behind the scenes,
Well, quietly, and some of us are anxious to see things. So since your appointment, is there anything that you can point to that went bottom up? And I say bottom up from the standpoint of originating with the private sector and now has been enacted into law.
Well, I would say that the only one that I can point to directly would be, and it would not have been from the private sector alone, because the motion did not come from the private sector, it came from the representative agriculture in the Senate. But it would have to be the age for lowering, because I spoke about that in my budget statement as well. To lower the age for, it is difficult when you have to wait, for a young man has to wait until he reaches 25.
Right.
And that has been done, and we're grateful for that. What we really want to see coming out of this study that we're doing now, and the committee that will be formed, is that the actual pieces of legislation that has been mentioned and the suggested changes, that we recommend those changes and then it be brought. One important thing to note is that it doesn't always have to come in Parliament from the private sector to reach the ear of government, meaning directly. As I mentioned to you many times, I would speak on issues to MPs or to other senators, and that is a way of feeling them out, so to speak, to see where their mind is with regard to that. What does government think about that, without putting them on the spot? Because you have to understand the sensitive nature of politics in Grenada. And if we raise issues that they are not ready with yet, or they are readying, but we try to push them too far, we want to make sure that we always have an open door with them.
But is that your concern? I mean, you just as they're there to represent their constituencies and Grenada, you have a constituency of your own,
Absolutely.
Which is the private sector.
Absolutely.
And how, therefore, would you respond to the thought that the sectorial interests within Parliament have been more reactive than proactive? In other words, government brings something, all in favor say aye, and the sectorial people may agree or disagree, as opposed to what I referred to earlier as the bottom up, where whether it's agriculture, whether it's labor, whether it's the private sector representative, bringing issues that are of sectorial interest to Parliament and advocating for those changes within our legislature.
So it has been done, and it is currently being done, and we have good unity amongst the independent senators in Parliament. And many times we oppose, government, or we have to get more details, and we ask for government to provide those details. Where is this coming from? Mm-hmm. How is this going to affect us? That's always our concern. How are our constituents, for lack of a better word, going to be better served? Mm-hmm. So one of the issues that have been on the table for a long time is crop theft, right? Farmers are business people.
Correct.
And when we look at, for example, Marketing Board, what has happened with Marketing Board, that winding down of Marketing Board, farmers have become more prominent to take up that slack, to be able to provide now, to ramp up production and to be able to provide. So farmers are more, we encourage the farmers to join the chamber. We have had over the last 2 years people asking more and more from the medium and small sectors of the economy, small business, MSMEs and so on. Mm-hmm. So with regard to us bringing forth legislation, what I was actually doing prior to government making that change is that we were actually having in the chamber, I'm not sure many people even in our membership knows about it, but I had engaged a lawyer, and I mentioned to that lawyer that, look, we are going to make sure and get funding. I want you to research the 4 pieces of legislation that refer to the license, because what government has done is to reduce that age, but that's not the only aspect that needs reviewing. Mm-hmm. But it's a quick fix and it works for now. Yeah. So I had a lawyer. The lawyer was looking into that real time, while and then government came with that fix. So it sort of solves the major issue for now. But there are other aspects that we need to look at. But now that the government, for example, has increased the age for education, that was an issue for us in terms of, well, if students are leaving school at 16 plus and they can't get their license till 18, then who has to drop them to university? Mm-hmm. How are they going to get a part-time job? How are they going to drive? In Barbados, the age to get your license is your private license is 16. Why does ours have to be at Canada? It's 17. In US, it's 16 as well. Why are we still at 18?
We're not still at 18. Why did we move to 18? Because it was 17.
Right, correct, right. So even that has to be looked at. But now that the law has changed with regard to schooling, and students have to remain in school up to 18, and that has recently passed, then that kind of solves that problem, but not entirely, because it says schooling, not necessarily high school, mm-hmm. because you can still leave school at 16 plus and still have to need to go to university. So there's still some aspects of it that has to be tweaked. Yeah.
Okay. Kennie, we are going to just slip into a conversation now on Grenada's economic outlook. And as from your seat, what are some of the major highlights or positives that you are seeing taking place within our economy?
Colin, before I dive into it, I want us to go back a little bit. I think we're in 2024. However, not too long ago, barely 2 years ago, we had a pandemic. What that did to businesses, the apparatus that we refer to as business, that means its finances, its operations, its corporate affairs, were torn down. Businesses were at zero. I don't think the public understands generally how much it takes to have that machinery working again. 2022 was one of those years where it was so filled with uncertainty, but being resilient, what we did, slowly but surely, confidence was momentum was built. And there, 2023, that was a fantastic year for businesses getting back into the saddle. However, we had a lot of issues, the supply chain issues that exist then, and wondering what is the new normal. 2023 was simply trying to adapt to what is normal. And need I say that we still have not adapted, because since then, 2 wars have started. The issue with the Panama Canal, all of that affects trade and vicariously affects the cost of goods. We are in very tender hooks in terms of what happens in terms of price controls throughout the country. And as we can see, some goods are quite inflated. Though I must admit that in some instances, products that are locally produced have gone into the stratosphere, even though the supply chain issues remain intact in some ways. Economically, however, as we have seen, the IMF report indicates that Grenada has experienced a nice growth spurt. But what I see is not what you call a peak that is like Guyana's, for example, which is in the stratosphere. There will be peaks and troughs. I think we are going through a little trough simply because a lot of the projects, the hotel projects that were supported by construction have completed. And I guess the next cohort of buildings will take place. We have seen a little downfall in SGU's business, not because of SGU's efforts, but rather through competition. Ross University, who used to be in Dominica, went to Barbados, and purposely so as a rival. I believe, though, that in time we understand that SGU will come back in the way that it was, which would augur well for us. However, I have to admit that the other strong sectors, one of the strongest sectors is that of our tourism industry. Grenada has just begun to identify what its tourism product is like. And that is important. Where are we placing ourselves? It's important at this time to recognize what are the synergies, and you mentioned agriculture some time ago. I think there is a whole new insight and balance that has to be put in place to deal with agriculture. What do we want? Are we going to be a professional society?
No, if I can interrupt you, just if you can just chat some of the positives or some of the highlights. I am going to get into agriculture, by the way. Are we highlighting agriculture as a positive today? And then you can go ahead. But as you look, you cited tourism, and I get that. So outside of tourism, are there any other highlights that you're seeing or positives within the Grenadian economic sphere?
Well, I think the business climate on the whole, there's a lot of confidence there. We've seen a lot of businesses open new businesses, that is, small and medium-sized businesses, and which augurs well for confidence in an economy. We have also the CBI program. I tend not to talk about it as coming from the bowels of Grenada, but certainly Grenada has changed. Our lifestyle have changed. The trade that goes through Grenada, and as such, our port is actually now grossly inadequate for the trade that is happening. Our balance of payment, however, has not seen that increase. We are importing far more than producing, which is of some concern. And there needs to be some serious thought processes as to how do we produce more in Grenada. I think part of it is essentially the organizing of that society. Business is about structure.
So
and foreign structure. We can go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just going to play just a little bit on that and just asking what are some of the main drivers that you believe in terms of the positives that you would have highlighted. And as we are talking structure and the fact that our balance of payment has not necessarily improved despite the importation and the activity that you would have addressed, money is going somewhere. So the question that I also want you to address is how can the chamber get more of our, let's say, informal economy to be normalized, to be chamber members and take part, be around the table in order to have those discussions to foster a wider, accounted for economy?
Well, Colin, it's no secret that approximately 60% of the business that happens in the country, informal means. I think the chamber has always and is conducting sessions to encourage small and medium-sized businesses to register, trying to point out the positives that comes out of that. Culturally, it's going to take some time because it's not something that we are very used to. It's something that we have more or less cultivated over the years. And as such, if we use Ivan as a mark for what has happened, I don't think that we have done enough. And therefore, to jump into agriculture slightly, I think there's a collective responsibility that we have to take in terms of where we are in terms of agriculture and its sustainability. Obviously,
how does the chamber propose to get more of these small to medium-sized businesses? And you're saying 60% of the commerce out there is not part of the formal economy. How do you get more of those individuals and enterprises to be part of the chamber, so they do have a voice, they will have a formal way of representing their interests, and together there will be more power for the private sector?
I think by trying to organize funding, for example, I'll give you one example. Lately, the Eastern Caribbean stock market, we had a session with them recently, and where there is funding available for these small and medium-sized businesses. Obviously, the chamber took part because we are totally in agreement with trying to get them there. It's a very difficult and sensitive issue. There's a lot of distrust in terms of our tax regime and how it operates. I will give you one which the chamber has put forward. I know the senator has spoken on it. Our tax system can be a bit punitive. Yes, people must pay tax. Yes, if you haven't paid your tax, there must be penalties. However, there is what you call a compounded interest element that is added each time, which most people are very fearful of because it tantamounts to quite a lot. We do have a situation where monthly advance tax is also notices are issued by Inland Revenue. Again, if you miss a month, interest is added and it's compounded. Now that is one area that we have mentioned to government that needs looking at. I don't believe the chamber on its own will be successful unless there can be some movement in that advocacy that will encourage businesses and make them feel that, hey, we can be part of something that could move that needle. And so our cost can be controlled and we don't have to live in fear.
Okay. All right. Viewers, it's time for our first break, so we'll take a break and we'll come back, but we're discussing Grenada's economic outlook and we'll be going through every sector of the economy. We'll be right back.
Washing the vehicle, use a bucket, not a hose. Save water.
This awareness initiative is part of activities under the Climate Resilient Water sector in Grenada. The project is funded by the Green Climate Fund, the German government, and the government of Grenada.
Hello, Carnival. Nice to see you again. Hey people, this is Ezra the Fun Machine, and I'm calling all revelers, carnivalists, and bacchanalists. Let me tell you, take a loan of $3,000 or more for your costume and pay only $340 per month with God's ready cash. Plus, you get to enter to win your loan back. That's right! Pay $0 down and nothing for the first 30 days. All you need is your ID, proof of address, job letter, pay slip, and 2 references. Visit your nearest God's already cash location today or contact your Carnival band for more details. Experience Carnival 2024 with God's ready cash. We are ready when you are. Conditions apply. Where are you come out? Where are you from? How was leave free promotion? It is on budget. Somebody send out the warning.
Spend $50 or more at any Hubbard's department or participating outlets for a chance to win free fuel, free drinks, free prizes, free property and vehicular insurance, free Hub TV and internet, free electricity, free coke, free water, free cooking gas, free paint supplies, free Dutch Lady milk, free passes to Sunshine promotion events for 2024, free groceries, all for one whole year. And every winner receives a free lunch package. But that's not all. Drive away in style in a brand new Isuzu D-Max. It sips, it doesn't guzzle. So fill out your entries and place them into the marked entry boxes. This promotion is brought to you in part by Dutch Lady, Danny, Promo, Supreme Bleach, Creative Chef, Grenlag, Floor, Salt Petroleum, Grenadian General Insurance Company Limited, Coca-Cola, Sunshine Promotion, Caribberies, Guap Bag, Sesame Spain, and Food Fear. Promotion runs from April 2nd to December 24. Terms and conditions apply.
Yard. Use a broom instead of a hose. Save water.
This awareness initiative is part of activities under the climate resilient water sector in Grenada. The project is funded by the Green Climate Fund, the German government, and the government of Grenada.
Economic outlook. I have with me Senator Rahaman, private sector representative in the upper house, along with the president of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Senator, when we left off, we were speaking of, and President Kennie was talking about how we can incorporate or get more of the small businesses involved in the chamber. I guess you do have some views on this, but in addition to that, if you can also add what type of infrastructural developments you believe are key in order for Grenada to grow its private sector.
So first one, people fear what they don't know. And when somebody is doing a business, small businesses start usually as family-run businesses. And perhaps the wife will do the accounts and the husband will do the sales, and it's a family or mom and pop operation. How do you scale that? It's difficult to scale it. And even when they do grow, oftentimes they don't know how to do the reporting end of it. Government requires certain things. You have to send in your financials every year. Well, many business people can't even read financial documents. So financial literacy is very, very important. And, you know, I think government has an interest in this, equally so, or perhaps more so, as does the private sector. So I would like to suggest that we have a consistent program, and I hope the president is taking a little notes, a consistent program whereby government can partner with the chamber to teach small business people how to report what government requires and how to report accurately. Also, like anything that is small, it needs to be nurtured. When you have a plant and it's young, if you give it too much sunlight, you'll kill it. If you give it too much water, you'll kill it. So the right environment needs to be there. Government needs to provide that environment. You're speaking about growth and the economy and scaling. And so perhaps the level of taxes that are required on year to year from a regular business, a going concern, should not be required for the first 2 or 3 years for a small business. They should get a break. It should encourage them to help them to build first, because before a tree bears fruit, it has to grow. and that the branches have to be well formed, and then it will bear fruit. So we can't expect to pick fruit when there's no fruit to be picked. You're going to hurt the tree, and so that is what small business people may dodge, because one, they don't know. Two, if they don't pay their taxes properly, they have I believe a 1.5% interest that's compounded per month. That's heavy, and as the President mentioned, some of us, even in the established sector, we pay our taxes in advance of them becoming due. And if you miss that, there's interest attached to that too, So I mean, we know we have to contribute, and there's a small economy, but we have to be willing to to help.
So are you suggesting that government probably sets up a unit that can provide these services for small businesses? One, either conducting the service in some cases, or providing training for small businessmen and women or enterprises to be able to take it on their own.
We have the skill within the chamber. We have accountants, we have professionals within the chamber. The government needs to assist in a program financially, allow the private sector to run it, and have involvement from the Ministry of Finance when it comes to taxes and inland revenue and so on, so that they will come and make their presentations, and the small business people will be able to ask the questions, and they will learn how to run a business. It has to be taught, because in many countries you have that entrepreneurial spirit where you will have the young ones behind the cash register or in the business growing up. Many Grenadians have not had that, where they can learn from their parents, and they have to fight it alone. So we have to provide that for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Colin, if I may just chime in on that. I mean, what the senator is saying is so true. We have to understand the doing business index needs revamping. For small and medium-sized businesses, if I had to run all over the place, I don't know the legal requirements. I don't know what obtains in the Treasury. I don't know what I have to do in terms of my financial statements, etc., etc. I believe the government could basically start by having that unit as suggested, to incorporate all these aspects, that where you have a one-stop shopping, and the necessary personnel to explain to small business owners how they can actually start their business and go a long way into at least the first 3 years in finding out what are the KPIs, what are the key performance requirements that is needed, and also the business drivers. How do you identify what are the business drivers? You see, you will sell some goods and you tend to look at something as having a lot of money in your hand. But what are the inputs? How do we measure that? And I believe a small business unit, and likewise the private sector, through the banks, credit unions, etc., and the chamber, can all be part of that symbiotic relationship relative to small businesses.
Okay. We're taking a look at the IMF report, and there was signaled good, strong growth within the tourism sector. I'm going to get back to it because you started off on this one. What type of relationship is there between the chamber and the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association, for example, where we are seeing that strong growth?
I think there's a very strong relationship for obvious reasons. So one of the things that happen whenever a hotel is seeking to start maybe a new hotel, and I'm talking about a new brand, for example, one of the things they come to the chamber to try to have some sort of indication of who other people do I go to? Who can you point me to for my, productive issues, be it for construction or even employment? What do we have to do to advertise and get the right people that we need? Now, recently, the chamber has realized that we have a big problem with people being ready for the workplace, young people. We have started a program earlier on this month. It was its first. We've gotten funding for that to have professional training, a bit like a finishing school, as it were, so so that young people, I think it's maybe a generational thing. Those of us who would have grown up, Colin, yourself, and Salim alike, video games were not as prominent then as they were now. And therefore, when we left school and had to go into the job place, nobody had to tell us how to dress. Apparently, that is not as obvious anymore. And therefore, the skills that are being learned now are more of WhatsApp, which is a language on its own that is not akin to formal business. And so in light of that, we find that the Hotel Association does partner with the chamber quite a lot.
Okay. We see the strong growth, but one of the things cited in the IMF report is that we're going to plateau. At the end of the day, we can do so much in terms of marketing, but we do have limited room stock. The limited room stock also impacts on our airlift capacity because airlines won't fly if there's no place to put their passengers. Is it time where we may need a major, let's say, North American brand, the likes of a Marriott or Hyatt coming into Grenada, their marketing power and their lobby with airlines in order to assist us with airlift, akin to when Sanders came to Grenada and American Airlines unprovoked said that we're now moving to daily flights. They were like 5 times per week at that point prior.
I think Grenada is ready for that. If you look at perspective, Grenada is a little bit late in tourism. St. Lucia, Antigua, St. Kitts, Barbados, everyone around us, they're ahead of us. I think Grenada took some time to discover what is the type of tourism product that we have. And for many years, it had not been defined. It's not yet fully defined, but we're starting to see what that might look like. The villa residential resorts seem to be, taking its roots. They usually attract a higher net worth of tourists. And therefore, that would, I think that's something that we would like, rather than going the way of having an Oasis-class cruise ship terminus in Grenada. Antigua has one, Bahamas have one, St. Lucia is trying to get one. But I don't think that we want 500 rooms hotel here.
But let me challenge you on this. With the villa-type exclusive resort, which is the direction you say that we seem to be going, will that put monies into the pockets of Grenadians in terms of increased employment, the goods and services? Because with the volume, we'll be able to satisfy. One can argue St. Kitts has a population of 47,000. Grenada has 112,000 mouths to feed. Is that the way Grenada should go?
So let's look at it this way. How many people does a villa-type resort? You now have specific needs with a villa to treat with the guest. Whereas in a room where you have, maybe 1,000 rooms, 200 rooms in one building, you can have services and employment that can serve many rooms. You have now need of a cook for each. You have now need of somebody who takes care of the grounds. You have specific needs that you cater for a family rather than an individual who might even be a backpacker. So there's certainly a lot more people employed with these types of resorts. And the outreach, a lot of these people want to experience the country. They didn't come to Grenada to eat burgers and fries or food. That is something that the Tourism Authority has been promoting recently, and there was recently a group of chefs who came to Grenada, about 5 of them in the James Beard Foundation. That was an excellent way of introducing Grenada's food and using our spices, etc. So there could be a lot of excitement and a lot of merit in choosing that type of tourism product rather than the 2,000 room hotels.
Mm-hmm. How does the chamber interface with new investors? And we know a lot of it has been coming through the CBI program, or rebranded our Immigration Migration Agency and investment programs. How do you interface with them? Do you have an opportunity to share what are some of the wishes of the chamber and your outlook for Grenada's economic development?
Naturally, we're one of the first ports of call. simply because businesses tend to want to speak to businesses to find out, okay, what's the business climate like? How can we get around maneuvering in terms of what we have to do? The chamber tends to be a good speaking ground for that sort of activity.
Have we seen, just in relation to that, have we seen a disruption of, let's say, industry practices and wages? One can remember, if we go back in the late 90s when the offshore banking came into Grenada, wages went skyrocketed and our local businesses couldn't compete. Are we seeing that type of disruption taking place?
Well, if you think about it in this context, I believe we've had a longer history of that than we take note of. Whether we like it or not, SGU, which is education tourism, has seen the proliferation of rentals, what you call apartment buildings, students' accommodation. That certainly changed the landscape of Grandance itself. One wonders if we shouldn't officially call Grandance a town because of the economic activity that takes there. And a lot of it had to do with SGU's input into the economy. Similarly, there is now a heightened sense of what else can be done in Grenada. Just to stick up a point, the blue economy. We are 12 degrees north. For insurance purposes, that is one level that most reinsurers would say to their insurance companies, get your yachts around 12 degrees north. Yet we haven't capitalized on that as yet. So I see the space opening up, not just for tourism, villa type tourism, but others that are very key and geographically.
What is the chamber doing to advocate for this type of thing? So, I mean, the question is, I want to know what is the work of the chamber?
So what we do, we lobby. As the senator would say, we speak in the air of the minister of tourism and say, guys, look, what are your plans? These are things that we should look into. And we do point out, and the chamber has a long history of actually pointing out at various levels, different positions that are complementary to various aspects of the economy over the years, and we'll continue to do so. Okay. That is part of our focus. That is part of what we do naturally.
Okay, Senator. A lot of the tourism growth, in terms of expansion and rooms, have been driven by the CBI monies. Mm-hmm. How do you see the collaboration that Grenada has now signed on to with other territories within the OECS to regulate this industry impacting our own benefit as Grenada now? Do you see it enhancing, or with the additional competition or the harmonization be problematic for our own growth?
I see it enhancing. Generally, where there's unity, there is strength. We see it at CARICOM. We see it with ECCU.
Well, there might be an argument about CARICOM, but I'll work with you with ECCU.
Well, they have had some advantages. There could be more. Mm-hmm. We hope with our Prime Minister there will be. But when you look at the IMF report, they have said 2023 4.4% growth.
Right.
2024 estimated at 3.9. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, it will settle down maybe around the 3% mark. So it is predictable. Our economy is stable. We are not relying only on CBI funds. I don't believe it will change because Grenada is already attractive for many people. I mean, you only have to sit on a plane 10 years ago and you'd see that when you're coming from the UK, most of the people would get off in St. Lucia. Now you see a greater percentage coming on to Grenada. You see the flights coming in full from Miami on a daily basis. There is definite interest in Grenada. Grenada is known for being a safe country, a transparent democracy to a large extent. I mean, we have some improvements to make, but we have a lot of things going for us. And so I see that will bring some stability to the program, because there are some threats to the program. And in the IMF report, it speaks to Grenada being very clear in terms of the program is very transparent, and they've gone, the Prime Minister has mentioned that as well, and that's what we want. We want it to be clear so that, and he has also mentioned that he has invited some of the Europeans and Americans down to Grenada to have a look, to see, to investigate and to have a look and to see what the program and who is involved and meet the staff.
Is it time for us to pivot in terms of the utilization and focus of these funds, because it quite heavily has been pushing on the tourism sector, and if we are going to see a stabilizing, normalizing of those investments, is it time for us to invest their transformation fund in other areas, some productive sectors, some probably in the intangibles of our economy?
So two things. If you recall, from a religious aspect, Prophet Joseph, when the years of plenty, and then what followed the years of famine. And in the years of plenty, you save for the years of famine. Economies are up and down, and the best of economies still slow, like China. And so it is something that while we have growth, and while we're benefiting from that, there must be an amount, and the IMF report alludes to that, that is assigned to the budget, so that, and then the balance is either saved or reinvested. And you speak to reinvestment in different areas. Yes, absolutely, because with the tourism product growing, they will need fresh fruits and vegetables.
So I would want to give some ideas as to where we can and should
agriculture
reinvest.
For sure, 100%, because as President mentioned, they want to taste our local cuisine. They want a taste of Grenada. That's why they're coming here. They're coming here not because it's warm and they have sandy beaches. They have that in a lot of locations all over the world. They're coming here for a number of things, and one of them is our culture, and our food is part of our culture. And so we have to make sure that the agriculture aspect of is right behind the tourism growth, because we can't be importing. When I go to, for example, Barbados, I see that most of their fruits are imported. All of the citrus is imported. You go to the supermarket and you don't find citrus from Barbados. We have had a problem with our citrus over the past few years, but this is something that is you still find citrus in Grenada, locally grown citrus. And so we have good arable land, and we really need farmer cooperatives and the farmers, and that's where the loans, the credit unions and so on, they need, and I've said that publicly before, that the banks and the credit unions, they need to assist the GDB in developing the small sector. It's not only government's job. Yes, you can take 1% and risk that 1%. When you're in business, you may have...
I want to get into this, and this was I had for later on in terms of just my own thought processes, but we have a complaint that our banks are liquid. You can't bring money to the bank, so they basically give you a fixed deposit and tell you 0% because they're liquid. Are they doing a good enough job of allowing that money to foster Grenada's development? Whether we're talking now banks or we're talking credit unions?
Right. Generally, when we speak, we have to put Grenada first. And my short answer to that is no, not enough. That's my short answer.
Okay. I will get a longer answer, but it's time for us to take a break.
Sure.
So I'll take a break and come back. So viewers, we'll be right back.
Struggling to secure a business loan because of limited credit history or loan security? The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee has the security you need. The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee, ECPCGC, is a bridge to accessible financing for micro, small, and medium enterprises in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. Backed by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank with funding from the World Bank. We work with financial institutions to help MSMEs get credit to stay in business, grow their business, or invest in green technologies. Our process is simple. Apply for a loan at your local lender. If collateral is in question, our partial credit guarantee is the answer. Once you meet the criteria, we pledge up to 80% of the collateral you're short of. Reach out to an ECPCGC participating lender or visit www.ecpcgc.org for more information. The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee for MSMEs. Your business, your growth, our guarantee.
The season with the biggest blowout sale from Sisson's Paints. Get 30% on Sisson's text code, Berger Weatherproof, and Easy Clean paints, all sizes. Your weather warrior, paint to protect. Ensure your home is season ready and beautiful. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Head to the color shop or any Sisson's hardware partner nationwide and save 30% now. Shop now and get a free plastic float with every Sisson's text code purchase and a free paint sensation paint with every 1 gallon purchase of Berger Weatherproof or Sisson's Easy Clean. Sale ends soon.
Bank on a bright future with Co-op Bank as we celebrate more than 50 years of partnership with Grenadians. Fund your summer plans with a new Visa credit card and get 5,000 bonus reward points on approval. Or you can get discounted interest rates with financing of up to $50,000 unsecured. With Co-op Bank, you have a future you can bank on. Apply today. Special terms and conditions apply. Welcome home.
Washing the vehicle, use a bucket, not a hose. Save water.
This awareness initiative is part of activities under the climate resilient water sector in Grenada. The project is funded by the Green Climate Fund, the German government, and the government of Grenada.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We're talking Grenada's economic outlook. We certainly invite you to join the conversation at this point, so you certainly can call in. But before the calls come in, Senator, the banks are liquid. Credit unions seem to be liquid as well. But yet still, individuals seem to struggle to get to opportunities to finance their ideas. What can we do to solve this problem?
It has to be locally driven. I don't know that we can ask some of the foreign banks to do it. So it has to be within our local credit unions, and the solution has to be found within our local credit unions and our local bank, indigenous bank. And that's why I mentioned the 1%. In any business, in any established business, you could risk a 1 or 2%. So the bank needs, or the credit unions, they need to understand that they need to do a little bit more. We spoke about this, the nursery plant, right, and nurturing that plant. Mm-hmm. When you look at the financial landscape, I believe that banks have really enabled the growth of credit unions to a large extent, because if you can't get a loan by a bank, you have no choice but to go to the credit union.
Right.
So the credit unions have benefited from that, and the membership is something that the people feel a part of something. They feel that I have membership in the credit union, I'm a member. And so it has done quite well in Grenada and in other territories, but particularly in Grenada, which is our area of concern. And I think that the same credit unions that have helped many businesses need to continue to do so, and need to have a special program, not only the Grenada Development Bank that needs to do that. The credit unions also need to do that and say to their members, look, this area here, this is for startups, and have special programs that are ongoing and continuous.
We see the IMF report, though, warning that there should be additional regulations on the credit unions because they don't have the same reporting standards as the commercial banks. How do you respond to that, and how do we juxtapose the two?
Well, as they're growing, they will have to. Because, to whom much is given, much is expected. And as they are growing, they will have to make sure that the depositors' money is secured. And so some of the same things that the banks have had to do, they will have to fall in line. But you remember, they are not banks because they don't have correspondent banks. They don't have certain facilities that banks have. So all of the regulations cannot follow. But some will have to. And that is for the Banking Association, the government, the Credit Union Association, I believe they have, the league. That is for them to discuss how, because at the end of the day, if regulation causes the cost of finance to increase as well. Right? The cost of money, the cost of lending money. And so we want to make sure that we're speaking about affordability here as well. And we want Grenadian businesses not to be burdened by too much debt in the early stages so that they can actually grow. So that is a discussion that has to be had. And I don't believe that the credit unions should be forced. Rather, it should be a discussion that it shouldn't be a top-down approach. It should be a consultation type approach.
Kenny, let me come over to you, and I'm curious because you did mention at the top of the program that the Bus Association is an associate member of the chamber. In order for commerce and our economy to grow, we must have transportation of people, not just goods and services. We have a challenge in terms of our national transport. What can the chamber do? What has the chamber done to ensure that the private sector employees can get home after working, that patrons who would want to participate in the economy later on in evenings can get to and from those activities, because the bus services are not helping us at this point? I don't have a caller online, so I certainly will come back to you on that. But let's get a caller. So good evening, caller, and welcome.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, Colin, and good evening to your guest, Jeff Humphrey here. I tuned into the program late, so I missed quite a part of it. But one of the things that deeply concerned me, and I have not yet heard, is the whole question of the future of our economy in terms of its restructuring. And I think that's a very important and strategic discussion, which not only the private sector must have, but the whole of Grenadian society, as we move into a post-plantation economic environment, in which we have had the demise of plantation agricultural production as a mainstay in the economy. And as the economy meanders, and I say meanders because there seems to be no very clear-cut conscious strategy as to what kind of economy we are going to build in the future for sustainable development, the reversal of poverty, and the improvement of opportunities for the people. A brief conclusion to my mind, and I mean, we don't have enough time in this in tonight's program to discuss it, is that the future of the Grenada economy in terms of its transformation and its ability to reduce poverty, create job opportunities, etc., and to raise the standard of living of the people, is a service economy based on high-end tourism. It behoves the private sector, and of course I believe the state should initiate these discussions for us to have a common understanding of where this economy should go. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there are immediate, imminent threats to the future of the Grenada economy. And let me give you one typical example of what I talk about. I talk about unplanned development, put in another way, in common language, squatting. If you look at the Mount Root Ridge, and I was fortunate enough to visit one of the hotels that I represented all of my trade union years, to be at that hotel speaking with the manager. And because I did so towards the end of the dry season, I was able to see, when you look at the Mount Rouge Ridge, all those quarter settlements coming over. Now, what does that do? Here you have high-end tourism, right? And I'm talking about those on the southern part of the Grand Beach, high-end tourism, where the average salary of a housekeeper is higher than that of a first degree teacher at a secondary school on average. You have those unplanned squatter developments coming over. There are no toilet systems set in place. They are now coming over and bothering these hotels. So you have pit latrines, pell-mell.
Okay, yes.
All of that coming down. The deforestation.
Yes, we are getting the point, but I don't want to be able to entertain some additional callers. So this also the problem, and I'd like you gentlemen to be able to respond. A couple of things: the importance of planning our economy, and the other important one is one of discipline among our citizenry, and that being upheld. So that addresses the squatting, etc. If we are going to go, as Kenny mentioned earlier, the high-end tourism, whether it is in fancy resorts towards the southern part of the Grand Beach or the villas. How do you respond to this?
So respect for authority is very important. Respect for the laws of the land is very important. And any society that wants to grow and wants to develop, they need to have those two things.
Would you tell the MPs who may be listening, or the MPs wannabes on the other side of the upper house, that they should not be writing letters of support for squatters, because the persons are actually either stealing government's land or they're on private lands, and then we want Grenlec to connect them, Nawasa to collect them, and just occupy what is not theirs?
So the interests of the state and Grenadians as a whole will always trump the private interests of an individual or a politician. And that is what we always have to remember, and that is always what we have to support. Is it in the best interest of our country? This is where our minds need to be at all times, because the government is owned by the people. The nation is owned by the people. The party that is in power, yes, they must be supported once the will of the people has been shown. So once the people elect a government into power, then it is our government. It doesn't matter who it is. It's our government, and we need to help them to succeed. But in that process, they also need to obey the law, and there's a reason why we go to Parliament and why we spend all of this time reading and researching and passing these laws.
Land use policy, zoning.
Absolutely, 100%.
Is that going to happen in our lifetime? We talk about it, we know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But is there advocacy? I mean, I saw a restaurant open next to a cement factory.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? And Kenny certainly can weigh in here in terms of what do we do to ensure that there is a proper developmental strategy, as the last corner would have highlighted.
Right. Let me speak to that really quickly. We have institutions like the Planning Authority and other institutions, Ministry of Health and so on, that need to operate independently and not be interfered with. as may have happened in the past. The law is there. They need to implement the law without fear or favor, but they need to do so in a responsible manner, meaning that you don't just destroy the lives of people if you can provide another place for them, an alternative for them. So you need to work area by area. For example, the parking of patrons on the road, of business owners even on the road. I'm a businessman, but it affects all of us, and even emergency services and so on. If you have your restaurant and your customers have to park on the government road, this is not a solution for the future because the roads are already congested as it is. We all know this. So the law has to be followed. There must be zoning, and the institutions that we have must be free to perform their duties.
All right. Kenny, I know you wanted to weigh in on this one.
Yeah, I wanted to weigh in on that. I think there was a move by the government to institutionalize what is now the Plan and Development Authority. Previously, what we know as physical planning was under the Ministry of Finance, if I'm not mistaken. However, a new statutory body was formed named the Plan and Development Authority, whose mandate is to do as you spoke of earlier. That is to zone and to impose the laws that relate to the built environment in Grenada. Unfortunately, the regulations are still a bit behind. In fact, we are still operating in Grenada under the 1988 regulations. However, and just to make a comment that was made by the caller, a couple of comments. Totally correct. The development of Grenada society, we need to sit back and take a look at it. We have the potential of being the best in the Eastern Caribbean. Right now, GDP-wise, we're fourth, whereas we were first. And the reason for that is let me step back, that growth has always been looked at in the eyes of a politician or a political party or political apparatus rather than development, which speaks to a more mature existence among political parties, understanding what is good for the country. And in that, the circumventing of laws, etc., always trumps good development when a particular party or the other decides that I'm just doing it my way. This has to stop because it's the biggest hindrance to our growth. We have a small landmass. So we have to now imagine with discipline, as I said, I was saying earlier, business is about development through understanding structures. And through those structures, we need discipline. And once we have those two combining, then you get creativity. We have a lot of room to create, far more than even our closest neighbors. But we are not taking advantage of it. Grenada is not getting involved in the business of business. Quite frankly,
let me interrupt you a little bit because I want you to work in our transportation issue because it is a major problem. And when I see your representatives, meaning employees of the private sector, standing up by Keep Left and standing up by decals, mostly female, 11 o'clock at night, I have a fundamental problem with this. And hence, what can the chamber do? How can the chamber agitate its associate member to ensure that there is service, or the government? Because we can have a national transportation system as well.
Yeah. Well, just recently, we heard of the transport board being beefed up, as it were, to now operate as a proper statutory body, given visibility through its CEO, the board, etc. The plans that were presented in terms of what they had in mind. And just by way of example, let me just inform you. The hotel industry spends nearly $1 million a year in helping their employees try to get home. The transport board is going to home in on the specifics of those licenses that are given and mandate that the bus drivers who are on routes actually follow the path. Now that has to include with some investment, because right now we cannot tell whether a driver decides to park up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, or especially on the western side, there's nobody going on that side. If you don't get that 5 o'clock bus, well, you're in trouble. I have employees who have that situation.
But a friendly government donating 15 large buses, similar in size to what the police has, and running from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. can resolve that problem. The small buses can park up at 2 o'clock if they so decide. But the idea is whether or not we should agitate, whether government joins this and get a friendly government to make an investment. 15 of these large buses probably can put a significant dent.
That was one of the proposals, that there is a study on foot right now, and it's happening in Grenada and St. Lucia. And there are proposals afoot that government get involved in that aspect of it. Details are still to be thrashed out, but again, the chamber is involved as an advocate, and one of the people that the research have spoken to about what do we think the viability of that will be, and it's an excellent idea. So it is important, and I understand your passion, I see your passion, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. Government has to get involved and do something about that issue. Essentially, what we don't understand, that if our economy can flourish beyond that 6 o'clock hour, then the economy becomes more vibrant. When the electric light came about, there was a totally different economy that was created, and almost twice as much as what happens during the daytime. And we have to look at it in that light. If we're developing, we must find a way to solve our transportational problem. And I believe the Transport Board is on the right track with their consultants.
Understood. Let me just go. You spoke a little bit about renewables. Are we seeing enough agitation? I don't know whether it's a PERC or who is the competent authority for renewables to be, or let's just use solar, for solar to be introduced, for there to be incentivized initiatives that would allow businesses and private owners of properties to get involved with solar that will reduce our fossil fuel inputs.
I think the senator spoke on a little bit on that matter earlier, and the chamber is certainly involved at this moment with a consultant that we have engaged and got funding for to do a study on the various legislations that exist. Now, we are going through the process of the final drafts, and it has highlighted a number of gaps in the legislation of PERC and other legislations that need to be closed in order for us to be more successful. We talk about EVs. We do not even have a plan for that. Mm-hmm. We do not even have mentioned what happens to batteries after they've run their life in between 7 and 10 years. Essentially, the study, I don't think we are quite ready with the legislative framework that will have that renewables, at least of solar. However, the emphasizing of its importance and the encouragement is there for us to actually promote. Okay. And the chamber is fully supportive of that.
Excellent. I mean, and I mentioned the EVs and the batteries, 7 to 10 years. We have to be very careful, Senator, with the importation of vehicles, importation of foreign use, whether it's hybrid or these electric vehicles, because if the battery life is 7 to 10 years, my understanding that the cost of a battery is basically the cost of a vehicle. So, you know, in importing the foreign use in that regard, we may not be doing ourselves any good. That you can respond to, but quite quickly I want to come to, if you have any thoughts, what's happening with Grenlec? Grenlec in terms of its leadership, renewables, Grenlec in terms of its leadership, leadership. We've seen 2 chairpersons resign now, and Grenlec is a key national asset, and leadership and vision, which the board should provide, is important. So I would like you just to share your own thoughts on this.
So, with regard to EVs, we have no legislation, and that is something we will need. There are certain economies in the Caribbean that have the legislation already that we can borrow from. and have a look at and tweak as needed. An EV battery can be repurposed. So after that 10 years, it can be used. So late last year, I attended a battery conference in a place called Stuttgart in Germany. And you learned about how they could be repurposed. An EV battery needs a lot of energy to get the car going. And when that gets to 10 years, perhaps it's 80-85% of it is still, only 15 or 20% is spent. Okay. So the rest 80% is still there. And a home does not need that spike in energy. It needs consistent energy. So it can be used as a battery bank for homes. It can be repurposed. However, the hybrid batteries, they are much smaller and they are quite costly to replace. Mm-hmm. So that's with regard to EV and hybrids. But with regard to Grenlec, all of our solar systems, unless you have a standalone solar system, it's grid tied. Mm-hmm. And so the importance of the grid being able to handle the EVs and solar systems en masse is important. We need to make sure that grid can sustain it, and that the IMF report mentions that, mm-hmm. Makes mentions of the grid and a strong grid. So that is important. With regard to Grenlec and the issues of generation, we have to understand and go back a little bit and understand that when the last administration gave the intent to buy back Grenlec, from what I understand, the private company, the owners of the then company, decided, you know what, the engines that needed replacing, we're not going to replace them, mm-hmm. because that's not going to be our problem. That's going to be the government's problem when they buy Grenlec. And so there are engines that are coming to the end of term that will need replacing, and that the private company at that point in time did not reinvest in, and now it is our responsibility to reinvest in it. And so that is something that government and the board of Grenlec, it's a significant investment. And to transition to solar energy and so on, that needs to be speeded up. That is fine. Geothermal energy, all of these areas, but we still have the existing supply to maintain. Mm-hmm. And so a solution has to be found. I'm not going to talk too much about that because they have not announced what their solutions will be, but a solution has to be decided upon.
Stable leadership would be key. Absolutely. In order to move forward with developing a strategy for a sustainable solution.
Absolutely. So the internals of the board and what would have caused those chairmen to move on, that is something that sits with the board, and I believe that it will be sorted out. I know that the studies have been done. I know that. I've seen it. And I know that the recommendations have been made. So they have a few options before them. And I'm not sure which option the board will exercise and when, but I know that they have a limited time to do so.
Okay. All right. It's time for us to do some wrapping up comments. So, Kennie, I will start off with you. And as you close off in terms of your outlook for private sector development, I want you to kindly touch a little bit on agriculture. How do you see Grenada's black gold being incorporated, and also the development of our cocoa industry? We have lost two stalwarts in recent times in terms of our chocolate industry, but how do you see those two contributing to Grenada's development?
Colin, you've touched on a sensitive issue for me, particularly nutmeg. Nutmeg are essential components of the food preservative market, the cosmetic market, the pharmaceutical market, just to name three. Given Grenada's size and the quantity of nutmegs that it can produce, we have dropped the ball significantly, and if we use Ivan as a marker of not what you call replanting or developing that industry further. We have been selling beans for far too long. And therefore, if we want to see a transformation and the growth in Grenada as alternative or equal to that of tourism, that is one thing that we have that we are just not taking advantage of. The varying types of jobs that this will bring, from labs to machine work, personnel, is tremendous. And therefore, I don't think we have a choice at this stage if we are looking at our future and we are contemplating how the survival of CDI, as you alluded to earlier, that's some investment. And it's not too difficult to do. One, we have to float a bond, for example. I think there are loads of people in the Eastern Caribbean who will invest, including that of Grenadians themselves. If there's a proper prospectus, the studying part, there are plenty of studies already in the ministries. And therefore, the development of Grenada, the thrust needs to be innovation. We haven't even spoken about IT. Grenada is the first to have an IXP exchange in the East, not in the Eastern Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean. And we're moving towards a data center. We need to find things that will bring the rest of the world to us. Cocoa and our chocolate. I think, given our size, we cannot supply what we call the bulk cocoa. However, we have the flavor. And therefore, I think the chocolate companies need to come together and market together as Grenada's cocoa. We are sensitive when we are small, and we wear our blood quite close to our skin. But we have to put aside all of that for development. And together, we can do it. The Chamber is committed to support all business ventures in Grenada by Grenadians. Did not get a chance to speak about the financial industry, but the Senator's points are quite spot on. I believe our credit unions are the future of our financial health. However, the regulations are well-founded. I don't think the regulations have kept in step with the growth that they have experienced, not let alone the underwriting capacity of what the credit unions can do and need to do. Equally, the data collection that they do, you have mortgages, consumer and lifestyle loans, which are all lumped together. They are very different in terms of financial sorts of financial segments. And we need to collect them and identify them to treat with the underwriting of the loans and the exposures that we have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And Senator, in terms of your closing comments, of course you can go where you want, but I would certainly want to hear you speak to capacity building within the private sector to assist in Grenada's economic growth.
So I'd like to touch on something that you asked earlier with regard to cocoa. To be very granular, I have not tasted better cocoa tea anywhere else than Grenada. I've tried it other places, and nobody can make a better cocoa tea than we have. That's a product. And that product, up till today, is not properly packaged and marketed. So we have certain things of value that is unique to us, how we make our cocoa tea and the taste of it, that if a tourist tastes that, I mean, we go to Starbucks and we buy different, or any coffee shop, and buy different, when we travel, and buy different types of, drinks. And this is a quality drink that stands out, better, arguably better than any of those. So we really have in our agri businesses, we need manufacturing. We need to add value to what we have, and for that to happen, we need sourcing. We need to source the bottles, we need to source the packaging, we need to have the machinery. Recently I went to a trip to China, and any small business that would like to buy packaging material, I can give them that contact. When I went on that business trip, I went with my own funds, but I didn't only go with me in mind. And so I went to visit some of the manufacturers and the packaging, the bottles, the companies that make the bottles, that produce the labels, labels, the machines that produce the labels, and so on. And I have some of those contacts that I'd be willing to share to small business people that want to maybe put together and buy a machine, or a cooperative that can buy a machine. Even our chocolate. I know of people in the Caribbean that when I travel, I like to bring local gifts to people abroad. And so I bring chocolates and that sort of thing. And if honey was allowed, I'd bring that too, right? Because I think that's very special as well. And many of them use it for to make a chocolate drink. But yet we don't have enough of that mix where we're still selling a lot of the bars, and we need to sell the mix for cocoa and so on. So product diversification is important even in that area for cocoa. In terms of the other question was what? With regard
capacity building.
Capacity building in Grenada, training. Our young people need training for the new jobs in service, yes, for these high-end institutions in terms of chefs and in service. Our young people need training in welding. Our hardwares need to stock new materials and different type of materials. If I were to go to an average hardware in Grenada to get a decking sheet, or what they call a deck pan, for a floor on a steel building, I don't think I could buy that in Grenada. I have to buy that from a neighboring island or bring it in myself. Why don't they stock this when it's so much cheaper now to put up a steel building than your regular mortar to buy all the formwork, to build up your columns, to tie your steel, and then to cast all of that, all the labor, the gravel and the sand to mix to put that in there, rather than erecting a steel beam. It's so much less, and it can save a lot of money even in roof, in the way that you construct the roofs in Grenada. So in terms of scale, it is not a one fix. Everybody needs to understand the hardwares need to bring in the new materials, different type of materials, building materials. We can be more efficient in that area. And construction is up. Interest in Grenada is up. More flights are coming to our country. I believe that the future is good for Grenada. We need to focus on our development and follow the plan, especially as it relates to building developments, and where we spoke earlier about planning the authority, and respect the authority and let them do their work independently. But I believe from the IMF report and from what we're seeing on the ground, there is definitely a peak in terms of interest in our country, and we need to ride that wave for as long as we can.
Senator Salim Rahaman, private sector representative in the upper house, Mr. Kennie John, President of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your insights into Grenada's economic outlook. And to you, our viewers and listeners, thank you so very much for being part of this evening's program. It was an absolute pleasure being with you, and I look forward to being with you again 6 days, 23 and a half hours. God bless.
Good night, everybody.